Blackridge Federal Penitentiary was more than just a prison. It was a fortress, a steel and concrete nightmare buried deep in the Wyoming Badlands, where the government sent men they never wanted to see free again. Drug lords, war criminals, cartel heads. This was the place where the worst of the worst were buried alive. And among them, locked in a high-security cell, was Logan Garmr, the notorious leader of the Black Reapers. For years, his name had been spoken in whispers across the criminal underworld. His gang had burned cities, toppled rival factions, and run the Southwest with an iron grip. But all empires fall, and Logan's came crashing down when the feds finally got him. They hadn't just arrested him. They'd made an example out of him, beaten, shackled, and dragged through the dirt for the world to see. That had been 4 years ago. 4 long years of solitary confinement, under 24-hour surveillance, locked behind blast-proof glass, with only the hum of the fluorescent lights and the whispers of the damned to keep him company. They thought they'd broken him, that they'd turned the legendary outlaw into just another prisoner, waiting to rot. They were wrong, because Logan knew something they didn't. His crew was coming. The Black Reapers didn't leave their own behind. And when they came, they wouldn't just be busting Logan out, they'd burn Blackridge to the ground. But what Logan didn't know, what no one inside or outside the prison knew, was that Blackridge had prepared for this. And they had unleashed a weapon, a beast unlike anything the Reapers had ever faced, a dog with more kills than any human guard in the facility. Its name was Garmr, and tonight it would taste fresh blood. The monster in the cage. Outside Logan's cell, down in the lowest level of Blackridge, where the air was thick with the stench of bleach and death, a row of reinforced cages lined the walls. In each one sat a K9, but these weren't police dogs. These weren't search and rescue hounds. These were killers. The government had been experimenting with genetically modified K9s, breeding them for one purpose: to hunt and eliminate threats. And the most dangerous of them all was Garmr. No one knew exactly what had been done to him. Some said he'd been trained on human cadavers, taught to target arteries, sever tendons, and silence screams. Others claimed he was part of a program that had been shut down after his littermates turned on their handlers. Only one thing was certain. Garmr didn't obey orders. He obeyed instinct, and that instinct was to kill. The prison break begins 11:57 p.m. The air inside Blackridge was still, thick with the quiet tension of men who had nothing to lose. The guards moved like ghosts, their hands resting on their holsters. Something was wrong. The warden, Derek Henshaw, sat in his office, a glass of whiskey untouched on his desk as he read the last transmission from the security team. A power surge. Then a breach. Outside the prison's heavily fortified perimeter, a convoy of unmarked vehicles had come to a dead stop. Satellite feeds had gone dark. The entire grid was failing. That's when the first explosion rocked the outer wall. Then the lights cut out completely, and Blackridge was plunged into chaos. Inside his cell, Logan Garmr smiled. The Reapers had arrived. The kill order. On the lower levels, Garmr's handler, Captain Royce, got the order. Release the dog. Royce hesitated. Even among the hardened men of Blackridge, Garmr was a legend, a nightmare in muscle and fur. Royce had seen what the beast could do. Guards gutted in under 4 seconds, riot prisoners shredded to the bone, and now they were turning him loose on the Black Reapers. The reinforced door hissed open. A pair of red eyes gleamed in the dark. Garmr didn't wait for a command. He had already caught the scent, and outside, in the chaos of the Reapers' assault, men with guns and leather cuts didn't yet know they were already hunted. The night sky over Blackridge was thick with smoke and fire. The first explosion had ripped through the outer perimeter, sending a shock wave of dust and debris through the barren landscape. The second blast had silenced the east watchtower, plunging half the prison into darkness. The alarms screamed, a piercing wail echoing off the steel and concrete walls. Inside the maximum security wing, Logan Grim Mercer rolled his shoulders, stretching the muscles that had grown stiff over 4 years of captivity. He could hear the chaos outside, gunfire, the rumble of motorcycles, the shouts of dying men. His crew had come for him, but something wasn't right. He felt it before he saw it. A shift in the air, a presence, a sound that didn't belong to the usual panic of a prison riot. A low growl, deep and unnatural, like a predator in the darkness. Logan stepped back from the steel door of his cell, his instincts kicking in. Then he saw it, red eyes gleaming in the dim emergency lights. The beast was already inside the prison. The Reaper's infiltration. Outside, in the swirling dust and fire, Cruz Wraith Martinez led the first wave of Black Reapers through the breached fence. The plan had been airtight: hit the power grid first, drop the security network, then storm the inner compound while the guards scrambled in the dark. But something was wrong. The resistance was too light. Where were the snipers, the mounted turrets, the riot teams? Cruz wasn't stupid. He knew when a job was going too smoothly. And this smelled like a trap. "Keep your eyes open," he growled into his earpiece, his voice barely audible over the gunfire. "Something's off." To his left, Jules Havoc Turner was already picking off guards, his rifle punching holes in the prison's defenses. To his right, Sykes and Reno moved through the smoke, sweeping the outer corridor with military precision. They were almost at cell block C, almost to Logan. Then the screams started. Not the usual panicked shouts of dying men. This was something else, something inhuman. Cruz whipped around just in time to see Reno, one of their best men, get dragged into the darkness, his scream cut short by the sound of tearing flesh. Then silence. A thick, wet silence that made Cruz's blood run cold. The beast unleashed. Deep inside the prison, Captain Royce stood frozen as Garmr moved. The K-9 didn't hesitate, didn't sniff the air or wait for a command. He had been trained for one thing: eliminate threats. And the Black Reapers were a threat. The beast launched forward, a blur of muscle and fury. His jaws found flesh, his teeth punched through armor, severing muscle and bone in a single bite. The guard he'd targeted didn't even have time to scream before his throat was gone. Royce barely had time to react before the door alarms triggered. The Reapers had breached cell block C, and Garmr was already on the hunt. Blood in the dark Cruz's hand shot up, signaling his men to stop. The hallway ahead was littered with bodies, but not just dead guards. These men had been ripped apart. Blood smeared the walls, deep gashes in the concrete, flesh shredded like paper. "Jesus Christ," Havoc muttered. "What the hell did this?" Cruz didn't answer. He was already moving, gun raised, eyes scanning the shadows. Then he saw it, a shape crouched over a still-breathing guard. At first it looked like a man. Then the eyes turned toward him, glowing, red, watching. Not a man, not even a normal dog. This thing was bigger than a wolf. Its muscles were coiled steel, its fur streaked with gore, and its eyes never blinked. Then it moved, faster than anything Cruz had ever seen. Reno had no chance. The beast was on him in an instant, its jaws crushing his ribcage like a tin can. His body jerked once, then went still. 1 second. That was all it took. Then Garmr vanished into the dark. Silence. Havoc's breath was ragged. What the fuck was that? Cruz didn't answer, because he knew the truth. They hadn't just broken into Blackridge. They had stepped into a hunting ground, and they were the prey. Logan Mercer's escape. Inside his cell, Logan Mercer heard the chaos, the screams, the gunfire, the sound of something monstrous ripping through his men. And he knew this wasn't a normal fight, but Logan hadn't survived 4 years in Blackridge without learning how to adapt. He took a deep breath, timing it with the pulse of the emergency lights. He could hear the guards moving outside, shouting, panicked. The Reapers were winning the fight. But something else was killing them, something inside the prison. Then, through the flickering lights, he saw the security override panel. Logan had waited years for this moment, and he wasn't leaving without control. With a single calculated move, he reached through the food slot, grabbed the closest guard, and slammed his head into the steel bars. The man crumpled. Logan took his keycard, unlocked his restraints, and just like that, Grim was free. But as he stepped into the blood-soaked hallway, he saw it. The tracks, huge, paw prints in blood. Something was here, and it wasn't human. Final stand in the yard, Cruz and the surviving Reapers reached the main yard, their boots splashing through puddles of blood. "Logan!" Cruz shouted. "Where the hell are you?" Then, out of the smoke, a shadow moved. Not Logan, not a guard, Garmr. The beast stepped into the open, its massive body coiled for the kill. Havoc opened fire first. The bullets hit, but the dog didn't stop. Garmr lunged, and hell broke loose. Blackridge was burning. The Reapers were fighting for their lives. And Logan Mercer, he wasn't running. He was about to find out if he could turn the beast against its masters. Because this war, it was just getting started. The prison yard was a war zone. Smoke rolled across the cracked concrete, mingling with the scent of blood and burning metal. The Black Reapers had breached the inner perimeter, but their celebration was short-lived. Because now they weren't just fighting guards, they were fighting something else. Something they didn't understand. Garmr stood at the far end of the yard, his hulking form outlined in firelight. His black fur was slick with blood, his chest rising and falling in slow, steady breaths. He wasn't just a dog, he was a weapon. A living executioner bred for one purpose, to kill. And now, he was staring straight at Cruz Wraith Martinez. The Reaper's second-in-command locked eyes with the beast, his pulse hammering in his ears. Havoc was beside him, rifle raised. "Take the shot," he whispered, "before it moves." Cruz didn't respond, because something was wrong. Garmr wasn't attacking. He was waiting. That was when Cruz realized this thing wasn't just some mindless animal. It was thinking, calculating, and right now it was choosing its next move. And that terrified him. A growl rumbled from the beast's throat, deep and low like the sound of an oncoming landslide. The muscles along his spine tensed. He was going to lunge. Cruz had a split second to react, and he made a decision that would change everything. Instead of raising his gun, he lowered it. Havoc hissed. "What the hell are you doing?" Cruz didn't answer. He took a step forward. Garmer's red eyes locked onto his every move, his ears twitching slightly. His tail, which had been stiff with aggression, gave a single, almost imperceptible flick. Cruz wasn't a dog expert, but he knew how to read body language. This wasn't just a beast. This was a soldier, and soldiers could be turned. "Easy," Cruz murmured, his voice low, steady. "We're not your enemy." The other Reapers looked at him like he'd lost his damn mind. But Garmr, he hesitated. That was all the proof Cruz needed. Inside Blackridge, Logan's gamble. While the Reapers were holding the yard, Logan Grim Mercer was moving through the prison's lower levels. He wasn't running for the exit. Not yet, because Logan had been in Blackridge for 4 years. He knew something the Reapers didn't. This place wasn't just a prison, it was a testing ground. And what they were up against wasn't a single monster. It was an entire program. He had seen the signs, the strange freight shipments that arrived in the dead of night, the medical teams that never spoke a word, the way the guards whispered about the dogs that don't bark. Blackridge wasn't just locking away criminals, it was breeding something. And that meant Garmr wasn't alone. Logan reached the security hub, where the prison's main control system was housed. The room was already trashed, monitors sparking, blood streaked across the floor. Someone had tried to erase the evidence. But they hadn't finished the job. Logan found a half-burned document on the floor. He picked it up, scanning the words through the flickering red lights. Project Revenant, Phase 3 Deployment, Subject Gamma 01, Status, Active Additional Units, Data Redacted. Directive, Lethal Response to Unauthorized Entry. Logan's grip tightened around the paper. Additional units. They hadn't just let one of these things loose. There were more, and they were still inside the prison. The hunt begins. Back in the yard, Cruz was still locked in a silent standoff with Garmr. The Reapers were frozen, weapons ready, waiting for something to break. Then it happened. Not from Garmr, from above. A metallic clank echoed through the night. Havoc was the first to look up. What the? Then the floodlights came back on, and all hell broke loose. The remaining Blackridge guards had regrouped, and now they were using everything they had. Gunfire erupted from the catwalks. High-powered rifle rounds tore through the air. The Reapers scattered, diving for cover behind overturned transport vehicles. Sparks showered the ground as bullets ricocheted off the metal. "Ambush!" someone shouted. Cruz dropped behind a concrete barrier, cursing. They were exposed. Then he saw Garmr. The beast had vanished. 1 second he was there, the next he was gone. That was when the screaming started. A guard on the catwalk let out a blood-curdling shriek as something yanked him into the shadows. Then another, and another. Cruz barely had time to register what was happening before a body fell from above, hitting the ground with a sickening crunch. It wasn't a Reaper, it was a guard. His throat ripped out. Cruz's breath hitched. Garmr was hunting, and he wasn't hunting them. He was hunting the guards. The Reapers take control. Logan stormed into the yard, a rifle stolen from a dead guard slung over his shoulder. He took in the chaos, the firefight, the bodies, the Reapers barely holding their ground. Then he saw Cruz, and he saw the dog. For a split second, Logan thought his second-in-command had lost his mind. Then he saw the truth. Garmr wasn't attacking the Reapers. He was killing their enemies. And just like that, Logan understood. "Cruz!" he bellowed over the gunfire. His lieutenant turned, relief flashing across his face. "Logan! Tell me you can control that thing!" Logan barked, pointing at the blood-soaked beast in the shadows. Cruz hesitated for half a second. Then he squared his shoulders. "I think so," he admitted. "Then we use him," Logan snarled, "because this isn't over." Another explosion rocked the compound. The prison gates had been breached. The Reapers were winning, but Logan had read the files. He knew the truth. This wasn't just about a prison break anymore. This was about Blackridge itself, and whatever they had been doing here, whatever monsters they had created, the Reapers had just unleashed something bigger than they could control. "Move!" Logan barked. "We're getting out of here!" As the Reapers surged forward, Garmr moved with them, not as a prisoner, not as an enemy, but as a weapon, and Logan intended to use him, because whatever was waiting for them on the outside, they were going to need every advantage they could get. The road out of Blackridge was paved in fire and bodies. The Black Reapers had done what no one thought possible. They had broken into the most secure prison in the country, ripped their leader from the belly of the beast, and lived to tell the tale. But survival was a fragile thing, and as the roar of their motorcycles tore through the darkness, Logan Grim Mercer knew one thing for certain. They weren't free yet. The prison alarms were still howling behind them, their echoes stretching across the barren Wyoming desert. The feds would come. Not in hours, not in days, minutes. The government didn't take kindly to high-profile escapes, and Blackridge wasn't just any prison. It was a testing ground. Whatever was going on inside those walls, whatever monsters they had bred in the dark, it wasn't meant to be seen by the outside world. And that meant one thing. They would burn every trace of it to the ground. Cruz, Wraith, Martinez rode beside Logan, his face smeared with blood that wasn't his. He kept one eye on the road, the other on the thing running alongside them. Garmr. The beast moved like a shadow, keeping pace with the bikes, never falling behind, never making a sound. His black fur was streaked with gore, his red eyes locked on the darkness ahead, as if he knew more trouble was coming. He was with them now. But the Reapers weren't fools. Garmr wasn't a pet. He wasn't an ally. He was a wild animal, barely leashed by whatever fractured sense of loyalty he had, and the second they weren't useful to him anymore, he'd rip them apart like he had the guards. "That thing's gonna turn on us," Havoc muttered. his fingers tight around the grips of his shotgun. "I can feel it." "Then we better make sure we keep giving it a reason not to," Cruz shot back. Logan wasn't listening. His mind was already racing ahead, calculating their next move. They had 30 miles of open desert before they reached the extraction point, where a convoy of stolen trucks and fresh weapons waited for them. The plan had been airtight. Get in, get out, disappear. But that was before they'd learned the truth about Blackridge. Before they had seen what was inside. Before they had realized Garmr wasn't alone. The first sign of trouble came in the form of headlights. Far ahead on the open road, a cluster of bright beams pierced the night, lined up in perfect formation. Military, not local cops, not state troopers, the real kind, the kind that didn't take prisoners. "Shit," Sykes muttered from the back. "We've got company." "Keep moving," Logan ordered. "They're blocking the road," Cruz warned. Logan clenched his jaw. "Then we go through them." A voice crackled through the Reaper's radio frequency, cold and precise. "Logan Mercer, you will pull over now and surrender, or you will not survive the next 60 seconds. The voice didn't belong to a cop. It didn't belong to a soldier. It belonged to Silas Kane, a name Logan hadn't heard in years. The others didn't recognize it, but Logan did. Former military, former spook. A man who had been part of the machine long before the Reapers had ever burned their first city. He wasn't law enforcement. He wasn't even federal. Silas Kane was the kind of guy you called when you wanted problems erased. And now, he was here for them. Logan grabbed the radio. "Kane, it's been a long time." "Not long enough," Kane responded. "You made a mistake coming here, Mercer. Blackridge wasn't a prison. It was a containment zone. And now, you've let the devil out of his cage." Logan's eyes flicked to Garmr, still running beside them like a silent shadow. "Yeah," Logan said. "I figured that out." "Then you know what's coming," Kane said. "And you know you're not walking away from this." Logan exhaled slowly, gripping the throttle of his bike. "I guess that depends on who kills who first." "You're outgunned," Kane said. "Outnumbered. You don't even know what you're really fighting." "Then enlighten me," Logan said. "Tell me what the hell Blackridge was really about." A brief pause. Then Kane said, "You don't want that answer." Logan narrowed his eyes. "Then I guess we'll have to beat it out of you." The second he dropped the radio, the first shot rang out. A sniper round tore past them, missing Logan's head by inches. "Go!" Logan barked. Engines screamed as the Reapers opened the throttle, surging forward in a deadly charge. Ahead, military vehicles blocked the road, armored SUVs, blacked-out trucks, snipers on the rooftops, a kill box. But the Reapers didn't stop. They never stopped. Gunfire erupted from both sides, bullets streaking through the night as the gang crashed into the ambush at full speed. Cruz veered left, laying down suppression fire. Havoc lobbed a Molotov toward one of the SUVs, the explosion lighting up the road. And then there was Garmr. The beast vanished into the chaos, moving faster than any living thing should have. 1 second he was beside them, the next he was on top of a soldier, ripping his throat out before the man could even scream. Logan saw Kane through the fire, standing behind the line of SUVs, watching with cold eyes. This wasn't a battle. This was a test Logan wasn't planning to fail. The Reapers tore through the line, the bikes weaving between gunfire, turning the kill box into a bloodbath. Logan's rifle cracked, dropping 2 men. Cruz launched a grenade into the lead SUV, flipping it in a fireball of twisted metal. But then something else entered the fight. A sound cut through the chaos, a sound that made even Garmr stop. A howl, not a dog, not a wolf, something else, something worse. And then they came. Out of the darkness, more red eyes appeared, not just one, not just 2, a pack, Garmr's siblings. The Reapers weren't just fighting soldiers, they were fighting the next generation of killers. The other Blackridge dogs had been released. Logan's stomach dropped. Because for the first time since this fight started, Garmr wasn't moving. He was watching the others, watching his pack. And Logan knew in that moment that everything had changed because Garmr wasn't choosing them anymore. He was choosing who to kill first. And Logan didn't know which side they were on. The night exploded in violence as the war for survival truly began. The night air was thick with the smell of burning fuel, blood, and gunpowder. The Black Reapers had fought through one nightmare, only to be thrown headfirst into another. Logan, grim Mercer, stood at the edge of the wreckage, his rifle raised, his muscles wound tight. His breath came in controlled, steady pulls. 4 years in a cage hadn't dulled his instincts. The Reapers had survived the initial ambush, but now they were trapped between two hells. In front of them, Silas Kane's kill team was regrouping. Soldiers in black combat gear, trained, disciplined, and not afraid to die. Behind them, the nightmare from Blackridge was loose, not just Garmr, the pack. At least 6 pairs of glowing red eyes burned through the darkness, shifting in the shadows. They were circling, hunting, deciding who to take down first. Logan had seen a lot of killers in his life, but these things, they were something else entirely. For the first time, a question settled in the back of his mind, something cold and unwelcome. Did we just unleash something worse than the people who locked us up? The answer came fast. One of the Blackridge dogs moved, a blur of muscle and death launching at a Reaper too slow to react. The man, Riggs, one of their gunners, barely had time to let out a scream before teeth ripped into his throat, severing his jugular. The body hit the dirt. Then the pack attacked. The night erupted in violence. Gunfire snapped through the air as the Reapers opened up, emptying rounds into the shadows. But these things weren't normal K9s. They didn't just charge straight in like mindless beasts. They moved tactically, splitting up, forcing gaps. One by one, they were picking apart the formation, flanking, outmaneuvering. Logan knew what this was. Military training. Someone had taught these things how to kill like men. "Fall back!" Cruz shouted over the gunfire. "Get to the vehicles!" A Reaper tried to break for his bike. A mistake. One of the dogs, smaller but faster than Garmr, tore across the dirt, latched onto his leg, and yanked him down. The sickening crunch of bone echoed through the night as the beast twisted, snapping the man's femur like a twig. Cruz fired a full auto burst into the thing's side. It didn't go down. It barely flinched. Logan's gut twisted. These weren't just enhanced K9s. They had been bred for endurance, stronger, faster, resilient, and they were still testing the fight. They hadn't gone all in. Not yet. Garmr had disappeared. Logan couldn't see him anymore, and that meant one of two things. Either the beast was waiting for its moment to strike, or it was choosing a side. Silas Kane's voice crackled through the radio in Logan's ear. "You don't have time for this, Mercer." Logan gritted his teeth, snatching the device off his vest. "You think I don't know that, Kane?" he growled. Kane's tone was infuriatingly calm. "You need to retreat. Those things weren't meant to be let out in the wild. You have no idea what you're dealing with." "Then tell me." Logan's eyes locked on the red glows moving through the darkness. "Tell me what the hell these things really are." Kane's voice dipped lower. "They were trained on death row inmates." Logan's chest tightened. "What? Live prey?" Kane exhaled. "It started with cadavers, then criminals on death row. Blackridge was never about prisoners. It was about training the perfect hunters. The ones you're seeing now? They've already survived every test. They're the ones that won." The words settled like lead in Logan's gut. The pack wasn't just genetically engineered killers. They were apex predators who had already taken down everything thrown at them. They weren't just dangerous, they were unstoppable. Cruz and the others were still holding the line, but they were running out of options fast. Havoc reloaded his shotgun, sweat dripping down his face. "We can't stay here. Either we die fighting or we get the hell out of Dodge." "We can't outrun them," Sykes snapped. "They're faster than the bikes." Logan's mind worked fast. Think, adapt, survive. They couldn't just run. They couldn't fight forever. They needed a way to even the playing field. And that's when he saw it. A half-crushed armored transport truck, still sitting near the wreckage of the ambush, still functional. "Get to the truck!" Logan barked. "Now!" The Reapers didn't hesitate. They moved as one, covering each other as they pushed toward the vehicle. The pack sensed the shift. The red eyes flickered in the dark. The tension shifted. The dogs didn't want them leaving. That meant they were afraid of something. But what? Logan slammed into the driver's seat, Cruz in the passenger side, the others piling into the back. The engine roared to life. The moment it did, Garmr appeared, not attacking, not chasing, watching. And for the first time, Logan understood something. Garmr wasn't just a trained killer. He was choosing his side, but not with them, not with the pack, with himself. That meant he could be turned. But first, they had to get the hell out of here. Logan floored the gas pedal, the armored truck plowing forward as bullets pinged off the reinforced plating. Kane's men weren't just letting them go. This was bigger than a prison break now. They weren't escaping anymore. They were at war. The truck thundered down the desert road, the pack falling back, but not giving up. Logan caught a glimpse of Kane through the smoke, watching them disappear into the night. This wasn't over, not by a long shot. As the prison vanished behind them, Logan gritted his teeth. He had a crew to protect, a war to fight, and a monster to tame. Garmr had run back into the desert, but Logan knew they would see him again. And when they did, it wouldn't be as enemies. It would be as something else. Because if they had any hope of surviving what was coming next, they needed to turn the devil's own hound against his masters. The real war was just beginning. The desert stretched in all directions, empty and silent beneath the blood-red sky of the dying night. The armored transport truck rumbled across the cracked asphalt, carrying the Black Reapers away from Blackridge. Every one of them knew this wasn't over. They had escaped the prison, but not the war. Logan gripped the wheel, his eyes locked on the road ahead, but his mind was elsewhere, back in that prison, back where he'd first seen Garmr. The beast had fought with them, but not for them. That was the difference. Garmr didn't take orders. He made choices, and somewhere out there his pack was still hunting. Silas Kane knew it too, and he was preparing his next move. Kane's war room. Back at Blackridge, Kane stood in the wreckage of the ambush site, his boots crunching over spent shell casings. His men were gathering the bodies, moving with cold efficiency. They had lost too many good soldiers tonight, not to the Reapers, to the dogs. One of his remaining operatives approached. Agent Connors, young but sharp, his face pale in the dim morning light. He held out a blood-smeared tablet, its cracked screen showing live footage from a drone overhead. "They took the truck," Connors reported. "They're heading south." Kane barely glanced at the screen. "How far?" "They're at least 40 miles out. No sign of them stopping." "They will," Kane muttered. Connors hesitated. "And the dogs?" Kane's jaw tightened. He looked past his men to the scattered corpses of his unit, torn apart in ways that no natural predator could have done. "The pack scattered," Connors continued, "but we're tracking 2 confirmed members, including Garmr," Kane finished. Connors nodded. "He didn't pursue them." Kane exhaled. Of course he didn't. That wasn't how Garmr operated. He wasn't a simple attack dog. He was something worse, he thought, and that meant he was making a choice right now. "We should put them all down," Connors muttered, "before this gets worse." Kane turned toward him, his cold stare cutting like a blade. "You don't just put down $20 million of government research." Connors looked like he wanted to argue, but he didn't, because no one argued with Kane. Instead, he cleared his throat. "What's the next move?" Kane lifted his radio. "We push them into a corner," he said. "We make them see they were never supposed to get out. And then, when they're desperate, we close the door." His eyes flicked back to the burning remnants of the battlefield. "No more warnings," he said. "Send the kill squads." Nowhere left to run. The sun was rising by the time Logan pulled the truck to a stop. The Reapers were deep into the desert wasteland, far beyond the reach of any normal police force. But they all knew. Normal police weren't coming. Cruz climbed out first, scanning the horizon. "We should have hit the safe house an hour ago. We're off course." "Yeah," Logan muttered, stepping down from the cab. That's not an accident. Cruz stiffened. You think Kane's herding us? Not yet, Logan said, but he's about to. Behind them, the rest of the crew dismounted. Jules Havoc Turner loaded a fresh drum into his LMG, while Sykes and Reno checked the stolen rifles they'd taken from the Blackridge guards. They had ammo, they had bikes, but what they didn't have was a plan. We need to disappear, Havoc muttered. Go underground, lay low. No, Logan said. His voice was calm, steady, deadly. We don't run, we don't hide. Cruz frowned. Then what? Logan turned to face them, his men, his family. We start a war. Silence. Then Sykes let out a low chuckle. You're serious? Damn right, I'm serious. Logan's eyes burned. We're out here with nothing, no backup, no reinforcements. The only advantage we have is that Kane doesn't know what we'll do next. We take that from him. We lose. Cruz nodded slowly. And you think we can fight them? Logan exhaled. No, he admitted. Not like this. And that's when he looked toward the horizon, toward the only real weapon they had left. Not without him. Everyone followed his gaze. Garmr stood on the ridge, watching, waiting. The beast had tracked them, followed them, not as prey, not as an enemy, but not as an ally either. He was still deciding, and Logan knew if they wanted to live, they had to decide for him. The pack's return, Kane's convoy, was faster than expected. By the time the Reapers had set up a defensive perimeter, the first drones were already circling overhead. Havoc raised his rifle. How long before they hit us? Cruz tapped his earpiece, scanning the frequencies. They're moving in fast. We've got maybe 20 minutes. We won't last 20 minutes, Sykes muttered. Logan ignored them. His focus was on Garmr. The beast hadn't moved, still perched on the ridge like a goddamn ghost. Logan took a breath. Then he made a choice. He climbed the ridge. Alone. Cruz cursed. Logan, I got this. No hesitation, no second guessing. The Reapers could fight soldiers, but they couldn't fight what was coming. Not without Garmr. Logan reached the top, standing face to face with the beast. Garmr stared at him, those red eyes burning like dying stars. Logan knew this wasn't about control. It was about respect. You want blood? Logan asked, his voice steady. You want war? Garmr's ears flicked, his nostrils flared. Then fight with us, Logan said. Fight for us. Garmr didn't move, didn't react. Then, from the distance, the second howl rose. Another beast, another pack member, and Logan realized Garmr wasn't alone, and neither were they. The first strike. The Reapers weren't waiting for Kane. They took the fight to him. The moment the first military convoy rolled in, Garmr moved. No command, no hesitation. He ripped into them. The second Blackridge dog followed, and just like that, the war had begun. Logan and his crew opened fire, turning the desert into a war zone. Soldiers fell, vehicles erupted in flames, and Kane, he watched it all. He had underestimated them, underestimated Garmr, and now for the first time he was losing, but he wasn't done yet. Because Kane wasn't just a soldier, he was a strategist, and he had one last trick up his sleeve. As the Reapers pushed forward, tearing through the ambush, Kane gave the only order that mattered. Release the rest, a moment of silence. Then the entire desert howled, and Logan knew the real war was about to begin. The desert was alive with the sound of war. Gunfire rattled through the air, bullets cutting through smoke and dust. Engines roared as the Black Reapers fought like devils against a force that was never meant to be fought. Because this wasn't just a battle against Silas Kane's soldiers. This was a fight against something else, something worse. Logan dove behind a burnt-out military SUV, his rifle kicking against his shoulder as he fired into the chaos. Somewhere ahead, Garmr and his new pack ripped through Kane's forces like they were nothing. It wasn't enough, because Kane had released the rest. The Blackridge dogs, more of them bigger, meaner, unchained from whatever leashes they had once known. This wasn't just an ambush anymore. It was a slaughter. The pack's loyalty is tested. Cruz Wraith Martinez had spent his life fighting wars, on the streets, in prison, in the Reapers. But this was something else. He emptied another magazine into the nearest red-eyed beast, watching it shrug off the bullets like they were nothing. The damn thing moved like a ghost, weaving through the storm of lead, hunting them with the precision of a trained killer. No, not trained, born. Garmr was still fighting with them, but it wasn't out of loyalty. It was because the other dogs weren't part of his pack. Not anymore. And that meant something. Because Garmr wasn't just a monster. He was a leader. And right now, he was making a choice. Cruz caught the way the other beasts hesitated, watching Garmr, waiting. There was a second, just a split second, where everything could have gone another way. If Garmr had chosen them instead of the Reapers, the fight would have been over. Instead, Garmr did something no one expected. He charged his own kind, tore through them, challenged them. The hierarchy was being rewritten in real time, and Cruz saw the moment the others understood. They weren't the pack anymore, the Reapers were, but that didn't mean the fight was over, because Kane's forces, they weren't stopping. Kane's last move. Silas Kane stood a mile away, watching the fight unfold from the ridge. His hands were steady, his mind was calm. His men were dying, but that was acceptable, because Kane had never intended to win this fight. No, he was buying time for the real move. He turned to his last remaining asset, a soldier standing just behind him, holding a device no bigger than a phone. "Activate it," Kane said. The soldier hesitated. "Sir, we don't even know if the control program still works." Kane grabbed him by the collar. His voice turned to ice. "I said activate it." The man swallowed hard and pressed the button. Everything changes. Logan had just cleared another target, his breathing sharp, his body running on instinct. Then he heard it. A frequency, not a sound, not really, more like pressure, like something humming just outside of reality. And everything stopped. Garmr froze mid-charge, his head snapped up, ears flat, body trembling like he'd just been electrocuted. The other dogs reacted instantly, one by one. Their heads jerked toward the sky, eyes wide, bodies shaking, muscles locking like puppets caught in invisible strings. It was a signal, some kind of command override. Cruz's gut went cold. What the hell is this? Then the Blackridge dogs turned on them, including Garmr. The beast's eyes flashed, not red, not glowing, but conflicted. His body fought itself, claws digging into the dirt, muscles coiling like he was at war with something inside his own head. Logan saw it, understood it. Garmr wasn't choosing to attack. He was being forced, breaking the chains. Garmr lunged at Logan, not like before, not instinct, not strategy. It was programming. The beast wasn't in control anymore. And Logan had seconds to fix that. He didn't move, didn't raise his weapon. He did the only thing that mattered. He spoke. "Garmr!" Logan barked, his voice sharp, commanding, not pleading, not begging. "This isn't you." The beast slowed. His claws raked the ground, his jaws inches from Logan's throat, but his eyes flickered, struggling, fighting. And Logan pressed the moment. "You don't take orders," he growled. "Not from them, not from anyone." Garmr snapped his jaws. A violent twitch raked through his whole body, his breath coming in sharp, ragged bursts. The signal was forcing him, but the choice was still his, and in the end, that was all that mattered. Then Garmr turned. He didn't lunge for Logan. He went for the drone, the machine that had been broadcasting the frequency. One bite, one brutal, earth-shattering crunch, the signal died. And just like that, the pack was free. The last stand, Silas Kane felt it, not saw it, not heard it, felt it, the shift. The moment control was gone. And now he was the prey. Garmr turned his head, his red eyes locking onto the ridge. He knew where Kane was, and now he was coming for him. The last of Kane's men were already breaking. Their advantage was gone. Their weapons were empty, their reinforcements dead, their leader out of options. And Logan, he was still standing, still breathing, still alive. The Reapers had won. But Logan knew it wasn't over, because Kane wasn't the real enemy. The people who had built Blackridge, the ones who had created Garmr, who had bred this nightmare into existence, they were still out there, and they wouldn't let this go. Logan holstered his weapon. Then he climbed the ridge. Silas Kane stood alone now, watching as his empire crumbled. "You should have killed me in Blackridge," Logan said. Kane exhaled, bloody, beaten, but still smirking. "You think you won," he muttered. Logan didn't hesitate. He raised his gun and put a bullet through Kane's skull. The body dropped. The war was over. But the real fight had just begun. The aftermath. The Reapers rode into the sunrise, their bikes roaring through the empty desert. Garmr running alongside them. The beast had made his choice. He was with them now. But Logan knew this wasn't the end. Blackridge had been just one piece of something bigger. And if the government had won Garmr, they had more. Somewhere out there another war was brewing, and when it came, the Reapers would be ready. The desert was merciless, stretching endlessly in all directions, a wasteland of dust and jagged rock. The Black Reapers had survived the impossible, breaking out of Blackridge, outlasting Kane's ambush, and taking Garmr as their own. But survival wasn't enough. Not anymore. Logan rode at the head of the pack, his grip firm on the handlebars of his stolen military bike. His ribs ached from the bruises of battle, his mind replaying everything that had happened in the past 12 hours. The blood, the gunfire, the things they had seen, the things they had unleashed. Garmr ran beside them, silent, relentless, his black form cutting through the dust like a shadow that didn't belong to this world. He wasn't just keeping pace, he was tracking something. Logan knew better than to ignore that. They had been riding for almost an hour since Kane's death. The war was over in the immediate sense, but Logan wasn't stupid. Men like Kane were just pieces on the board. The real enemy, the ones who created the program inside Blackridge, they were still out there, and they would never let them go. Cruz rode up beside him, the desert wind howling between them. "We need to stop soon, regroup, figure out our next move." Logan gave a small nod. Cruz was right. They had won the battle, but they were riding blind. They needed food, weapons, intel. They needed a plan. Behind them, the Reapers were a mess. Some had wounds that hadn't been treated yet. Others had the kind of shell shock that only came from staring into the eyes of something not human. They weren't a gang anymore. They were survivors of a war no one knew existed. Logan raised his fist, signaling a stop. The group slowed, the bikes coming to rest near a ruined gas station, long abandoned, its windows shattered, the pumps rusted out. As soon as Logan cut the engine, Garmr stopped running. The beast stood still, head raised, sniffing the air. Logan slid off the bike, keeping his movement slow, deliberate. Garmr had chosen to stay with them for now, but Logan knew better than to assume loyalty, especially not with something like him. He walked toward the beast, keeping just enough distance to not be seen as a threat. "What is it?" he asked softly. Garmr didn't growl, didn't snarl. He just stared into the desert. The wind shifted, carrying something faint. A sound. Engines. Cruz swore under his breath. "We've got company." Havoc was already loading his shotgun. "How many?" Reno climbed onto the remains of a broken car, squinting into the distance. "2, maybe 3 vehicles, coming fast." Logan didn't need to hear more. "Get in position." The Reapers moved like ghosts, disappearing into cover, weapons drawn. It wasn't an army, but it didn't need to be. Logan didn't believe in luck, but if the right people were coming, this might be their chance to turn the game. The first vehicle came into view, a blacked-out military-grade SUV. Then the second, a modified pickup, armored, with bulletproof plating. The Reapers tensed. Then the SUV skidded to a stop, and the first person to step out wasn't a soldier. It was Silas Kane's lieutenant. The man was young, barely over 30. his sharp eyes scanning the ruins before he lifted his hands in surrender. Cruz had his gun trained before the bastard could speak. "You've got 5 seconds to tell me why we shouldn't put a bullet in you." The man didn't flinch. "Because I know who's coming next." Logan stepped forward, watching every detail, the way the guy's fingers twitched, the subtle shift in his stance. He wasn't lying. "They're cleaning house," the man continued, his voice low. "Kane was just the first mistake. They never expected you to make it out of Blackridge. They never expected you to—" He glanced at Garmr. "Take one of their assets." Havoc let out a sharp laugh. "Asset? That's what you call these things?" The man ignored him. "They can't let you live. You understand that, right?" His eyes locked onto Logan's. "It's not about revenge. It's about secrets. You know too much. You've seen too much. And now they're sending everyone." Logan held his gaze, expression unreadable. Then he asked the only question that mattered. "Who?" The man exhaled. "You ever hear of Project Revenant?" The name sent a cold weight into Logan's gut. Cruz's eyes narrowed. "The hell is that?" The man hesitated, then threw something to the ground at their feet. A small black drive. "That," he said, "is everything. The research, the training protocols, the test subjects." He looked at Garmr again. "What they did to them." Reno picked up the drive, turning it over in his fingers. "And why exactly are you helping us?" "Because I saw what happened back there." The man's voice was quieter now. "Kane thought he could control them. He was wrong." Silence. Logan studied him. Every instinct screamed trap. But something about the way the bastard's hands were shaking. Something real was behind it. Finally, Logan nodded. "You can stay," he said. "But if you so much as look at me wrong, you're dead." The man gave a tight nod. "Understood." Logan turned to Cruz. "Find out what's on that drive." Cruz plugged it into his tablet. Seconds later, classified files filled the screen, and the truth hit like a hammer. The Blackridge dogs, they weren't just a project. They were Phase 1. Phase 2, human trials. Logan's breath came slow, controlled. They were making something worse. Cruz's hands were clenched into fists, and now it's out. Silence settled over the Reapers like a storm. Then Garmr lifted his head, sniffing the wind. And Logan felt it, the first real sense of fear since they had left Blackridge. Because whatever came next, this wasn't about winning, it was about who would be left standing. He looked at Garmr. The beast looked back. And Logan finally understood. This wasn't just his fight anymore, this was Garmr's war too. The Reapers weren't just outlaws anymore. They were the only thing standing between Project Revenant and whatever nightmare was still waiting in the dark. Logan exhaled. Then he gave the order. "We hit first." The war wasn't coming. It was already here. The wind carried the scent of burning fuel and dried blood, mixing with the dust kicked up by their bikes. The Black Reapers had always lived on the edge of death, but this was different. They weren't just being hunted by men anymore. They were up against something else, something bred to kill in ways no human could match. Logan kept his bike steady, eyes locked on the road ahead. The world had changed in a single night. He wasn't just an outlaw on the run anymore. He was the last loose end of a project that was never supposed to see daylight. And that meant the people behind it would burn the earth clean to bury the truth. The black drive sat in Cruz's pocket. A pocket-sized death sentence, full of everything they weren't supposed to know, everything Blackridge had hidden. The files on the K9 units were just the start. The real horror came in the last encrypted section, one Cruz had cracked just before they left the gas station. Project Revenant had more than just dogs. They had humans, test subjects, experiments, and they weren't locked away anymore. Cruz rode beside Logan, his jaw tight, knuckles white on the handlebars. That signal back at the ambush, it wasn't just for the dogs. Logan didn't respond. He didn't need to. He knew. He'd felt it in his bones the moment Garmr had turned. That wasn't just a frequency. That was a command. And now, whatever else had been trained under that signal, it had heard it too. The safe house was 20 miles ahead, an old smuggler's compound buried in the mountains. It wasn't much, but it had weapons, supplies, fuel. They needed all three. They needed a plan, and they needed to figure out what the hell they were really up against. Behind them, Garmr loped alongside the bikes, keeping pace with ease. The beast moved like a shadow, silent, unnervingly controlled. He hadn't turned on them, not yet, but Logan could see it in the way he watched them. He wasn't with them. He was just waiting. Logan had spent his life around killers, but none like this. None that thought the way Garmr did. The way his red eyes tracked movement. The way he positioned himself near Cruz and Logan, always in striking distance but never striking. A predator with a sense of control. That was the part that should have scared him the most. And yet it wasn't Garmr that sent ice down Logan's spine. It was the feeling that they were being watched by something else. They weren't alone out here. The realization hit a second before the radio crackled. Static, then a voice, deep, calm. "You shouldn't have run." Cruz jerked his head toward Logan. The voice wasn't anyone they recognized. Then another voice joined in. Two layers overlapping, like two men speaking in perfect sync. Project Revenant was never designed to fail. A third voice, the same words. No hesitation, no delay. Logan felt his chest tighten. They weren't using a radio. They were broadcasting. More voices, 4, 5, 6, the same sentence. And then, silence. Havoc's voice cut in through the static. "What the hell was that?" Cruz was already pulling up the tablet, checking frequencies. His face went pale. "That wasn't a signal," he said. "That was direct frequency alignment." Logan knew the words, but hearing them out loud felt worse. That wasn't some radio command. That was multiple sources speaking at the exact same time, the exact same way. And that meant one thing: they weren't dealing with people anymore. Ahead, the road twisted through the mountains, disappearing into the rock. Logan throttled the bike, pushing faster. "Move!" he ordered. They needed to get to the safe house. Now! The Reapers accelerated, engines roaring, the dust trail stretching behind them. Garmr picked up speed, his body unnatural in its endurance. Never slowing, never breaking stride. Cruz checked his tablet again, eyes flicking between the data and the road. "We're getting bounced pings from every military satellite in the region. It's like someone's scanning for—" The drone strike hit without warning. The first explosion rocked the cliffside, a flash of fire and shattered rock. The second strike was dead on. Logan barely had time to react before the force of the explosion took out the road ahead. The asphalt cracked, buckled, and collapsed into a canyon of dust and fire. The lead bike, Reno's, was gone before he could even scream. The rest of them swerved, barely making the stop in time. The heat washed over them, flames licking at the edges of the road where the asphalt had turned to rubble. They were trapped. Logan's mind went into overdrive. No satellites, no heat signatures, no warning. Whoever was after them wasn't just sending men. They were using everything. Then the voices returned. "You are not authorized for survival." This time, they weren't on the radio. This time, they were coming from the tree line. Logan turned slowly, rifle raising. The others did the same. The forest was silent. Then they stepped out of the dark. 6 figures, tall, lean, built like shadows in human form. Their eyes weren't red like Garmr's. They were black, empty, and they moved in perfect synchronization. No wasted motion, no hesitation, not a unit, a hive. Cruz whispered under his breath, "Oh, hell no." Logan didn't hesitate. "Weapons free." The Reapers opened fire. The figures moved before the bullets even reached them. Fast, too fast. One of them, a man, a thing, was on Sykes before he could even blink. A hand wrapped around his throat and tore it out. Sykes dropped, gurgling on his own blood, body twitching. Havoc fired point blank into the one that had killed him. The rounds tore through the figure's chest. It didn't fall. It just turned its head, like it was confused. Then it smiled a low, inhuman grin, and it lunged. The fight turned into a blur of motion. The Reapers fired everything they had, but these things, they weren't normal. They moved like machines, but killed like animals. And worst of all, they weren't even the real threat. Because behind them, Something bigger was moving in the trees. Logan saw it just before the flash of movement, a shape, not human, not dog. Something else, bigger than Garmr, faster, a new kind of nightmare. Project Revenant wasn't a failure. It was just getting started. The safe house was gone, the road was blocked. And now the Reapers were out of time. Logan's mind snapped into focus. They had one option left. They had to run. But this time, there was nowhere left to hide. The first bullet passed through Logan's shoulder before he even saw the shooter. The impact was sharp, a sudden punch of white-hot pain that knocked him sideways. He barely registered hitting the ground before the next shot ricocheted off the burnt-out truck beside him. The world blurred, motion and heat and dust blending into one long scream of chaos. The Reapers were being pushed back. The figures from the trees, not quite human, not quite machine, moved with impossible speed, their black eyes tracking every movement with inhuman precision. They weren't just soldiers, they weren't just killers, they were something else. And now they had found their prey. Cruz emptied his mag into one of them, watching it jerk from the impacts, but it didn't fall. Instead, it turned its head, something almost curious in its expression, like it was analyzing the damage in real time. Then it moved. Before Cruz could react, it was on him. The thing didn't punch. It didn't stab. It moved with a smooth, surgical efficiency. One hand cracking across Cruz's ribs, the other twisting his wrist in a way that made the gun drop instantly. Cruz fell to one knee, coughing blood. Havoc roared, stepping forward, firing his shotgun point blank. The slug tore through the figure's torso, shredding through what should have been vital organs. It staggered, but it didn't die. Instead, it tilted its head again, then it smiled. Havoc took a step back. What the The thing moved, faster than any human could, its hands blurring. Havoc barely had time to block before it slammed him into the ground, its movements precise, mechanical, like a predator playing with its food. "Fall back!" Logan bellowed, ignoring the pain in his shoulder as he grabbed Cruz and dragged him toward cover. "Regroup at the trucks." They ran, moving through the wreckage of the abandoned road, firing behind them, but it wasn't enough. The things were too fast, too strong, and worst of all, they weren't getting tired. Garmr suddenly snapped to attention, his ears flat against his head. Then, without hesitation, he lunged, not at the Reapers, at them. The beast hit the closest figure like a missile, jaws closing around its throat. The impact was brutal, bones snapping, the wet sound of tearing flesh filling the air. But the thing didn't scream, it just kept moving. Even as Garmr ripped its throat open, the body kept twitching. Hands still reaching, still trying to kill. Then finally it stopped. Garmr let the corpse drop, hackles raised, growling. The rest of the figures paused. They stared at the fallen body, silent, calculating. Then, as one, they turned and disappeared into the trees. The Reapers didn't move, no one spoke. No one even breathed. Logan slowly stood, his pulse hammering in his skull. His men were injured, shaken, but they were still alive. And the things that had attacked them, they had left. Not because they lost, because they had learned something, and that was worse. Cruz spat blood onto the dirt, wiping his mouth. What the hell was that? Logan didn't answer. His eyes were locked on Garmr. The beast was still standing over the corpse, his body tense, ears twitching like he was listening to something none of them could hear. Then, finally, he looked up, and he stared at Logan. Not like an animal, not like a threat, like a question. And Logan knew, deep down, this wasn't over, not even close. The Reapers regrouped, checking wounds, reloading weapons. The trucks were still operational, but they were running low on options. Cruz leaned against the door of the SUV, pressing a hand to his ribs. "They let us go." Logan nodded, expression grim. "Yeah. That's bad, right?" "Yeah." The radio crackled, static, then a voice. "Mercer." Logan didn't recognize it, but the tone, the calm, clinical detachment, sent a chill down his spine. "Who is this?" he demanded. A pause. Then, "I think you already know." Logan's grip tightened on the radio. Cruz tensed. "This some Fed?" Logan shook his head. "No." He knew exactly who this was. This was the real enemy, not Kane, not Blackridge, the people who had made all of this happen. The voice continued, smooth and steady. "You've made quite the mess." Logan's jaw clenched. "Yeah? You don't sound too broken up about it." A faint chuckle. "No, because this isn't a loss for us, Mercer." Silence. Then the voice said something that made Logan's blood turn to ice. "This was just data collection." Logan went rigid. "They weren't trying to kill us," Cruz whispered. "They were testing us." Logan finished. The voice confirmed it. "And now we know. Garmr was a success, but more importantly," a pause. Then the voice's tone shifted just slightly. "You were too." The radio went dead. No one spoke. Then Logan threw the radio to the ground and shot it. The crack of the gunshot echoed through the mountains. No one asked questions. They didn't need to. They all understood now. Blackridge was never about prisoners. It was never about rehabilitation. It was about creating something new, something they could control. And now it was out. Cruz exhaled slowly, still staring at the shattered radio. "What do we do?" Logan clenched his jaw. He looked at Garmr, the beast still standing, still watching. Then he looked at his men, his family, and for the first time since they'd escaped, he finally had an answer. "We end this." Cruz raised an eyebrow. "How?" Logan checked his rifle. "By burning every last one of them to the ground." No hesitation, no fear. The Reapers weren't running anymore. They were going to war. Garmr let out a low growl like he understood, and for the first time Logan knew this wasn't just his fight anymore. It was Garmr's too. The road ahead wasn't just a path to survival. It was the road to revenge. And when the time came, the people who had built this nightmare, they were going to learn what happens when you create something you can't control. Because the Black Reapers weren't the ones who should be afraid. Project Revenant should be. And Logan was going to make damn sure they knew it. The cold desert wind howled through the abandoned mining town, rattling the rusted signs and sweeping dust through the skeletal remains of buildings left to rot. The Black Reapers had chosen this place for a reason. No cameras, no satellites, no prying eyes, just silence, darkness, and the scent of something long dead in the air. Logan stood at the center of it all, gripping the rifle slung over his shoulder. His shoulder still burned from the bullet wound, but the pain kept him sharp. He couldn't afford to slow down now. They were being hunted, tested, and the only way to survive was to flip the game on its head. Garmr sat beside him, silent as death, his black fur shifting slightly in the wind. The beast's red eyes weren't glowing anymore. They were calm, focused, waiting. Logan wasn't sure if that was a good thing or not. Cruz finished securing the last of the tripwires, stepping back with a nod. "They'll be here soon." Logan exhaled, feeling the weight of the situation settle into his bones. The past few days had proven one thing. They weren't fighting humans anymore, not in the way they had before. Kane's death hadn't ended anything. It had only kicked open the next door. Project Revenant had been watching, studying, and now whatever was left of their black-budget nightmare factory was sending something new, something worse. The last fight had been an experiment, a field test. Now it was a hunt. Havoc leaned against the old gas station ruins, checking his shotgun. "Tell me again why we're not just running." Logan's voice was flat. "Because running doesn't work." Cruz gestured at the perimeter. "And this does." Logan glanced at Garmr. The beast didn't move, but Logan knew he was listening, watching, understanding. "They think they're in control," Logan said. "They think we're just another test." Havoc nodded slowly. "So we show them we're not." Logan's jaw tightened. "We make them bleed." Silence. Then Reno spoke up from the rooftop, scanning the horizon with his scope. "I see them." Logan didn't need to ask who. He already knew. The first sign was the dust cloud on the horizon, too precise, too controlled to be random. Then came the lights, not bright, not flashing like a normal military convoy, infrared, stealth-patterned. They were using every trick in the book. The convoy slowed as it neared the town. 3 blacked-out SUVs, no markings, no sound. Then the doors opened, and they stepped out, not soldiers, not men. The first figure was tall, gaunt, inhumanly precise in its movements. The same black eyes as before, but this one was different. The way it scanned the town, methodical, calculating. Then the next ones followed, 4 of them moving in unison, faster, smoother. Logan exhaled. "Targets confirmed," he murmured. Havoc's grip on his shotgun tightened. "Jesus, what the hell are we looking at?" Cruz adjusted his earpiece, running a quick scan on his stolen military tablet. The screen flickered, barely able to process what it was seeing. "They're not reading like normal signatures." Logan had already figured that out. Then came the voice, low, broadcasting on all channels. "You are unauthorized for existence." Not spoken, projected. The figures didn't have radios. They didn't need them. Logan clenched his jaw. They don't just move together, they think together. Cruz stared at the screen, his face tight. This isn't just cybernetics, this is something else. The first figure twitched, then they moved, not running, not charging. They dispersed into the buildings, shadows breaking apart into perfect, synchronized kill patterns. Logan barely had time to react before the first one was on him. A blur of motion, a punch that shattered the wood beam beside his head. Logan dodged, twisting his body just in time to see the thing's hand retract. Not broken, not injured, not human. He fired, 3 shots center mass. The figure jerked back, then corrected itself, like it was adjusting to damage, like it was learning. Then it came again. Logan barely had time to sidestep before it grabbed his rifle and crushed it. Havoc fired his shotgun from the side, point blank. The blast sent the figure sprawling, but not down. Logan grabbed Havoc by the collar. "Move!" The Reapers scattered, taking cover as the figures reappeared. They weren't attacking head-on anymore. They were adapting. Logan saw one twist mid-air to avoid a grenade blast. Another disarmed Reno in under 2 seconds, slamming him into the ground so hard he stopped moving. Cruz pulled Logan behind cover, breathing hard. "We're losing this." Logan wiped blood from his mouth. Not yet, because then came Garmr. The beast moved faster than any of them, hitting the first figure like a missile. Teeth sank into synthetic flesh. Metal, wires, bone. The figure convulsed, trying to react, but Garmr didn't let it. He ripped, tore, snapped, and for the first time, one of them stopped moving. The others froze for just a second. Then they all turned toward Garmr. The connection between them was silent. Then they moved. Garmr bared his teeth and ran straight at them. Logan didn't waste the opportunity. "Light them up." The Reapers unloaded everything they had. Grenades, bullets, fire. And this time, they went down. Not easily, not cleanly, but down. The last figure fell, twitching, its black eyes flickering like a dying signal. Then the silence came back. Logan stood there, breath ragged. They had won. But it wasn't a victory, it was a message. Garmr stared at the bodies, silent. Then, slowly, he turned his head toward Logan. And for the first time, Logan saw something in the beast's eyes. Not loyalty, not survival. Understanding. Garmr wasn't just fighting for them anymore. He was choosing a side. And Logan knew what that meant. Project Revenant wouldn't stop. Not now, not after this. They would come again. And when they did, Logan and the Reapers would be waiting, because this wasn't about survival anymore. This was about ending it, for good. Logan clenched his fists and clenched. They had drawn blood. Now it was time to burn everything to the ground, and this time Garmr would be leading the charge. The night hung heavy over the wreckage of the ghost town. The wind had carried away most of the smoke, but the air was still thick with the stench of blood and burnt metal. Logan stood over the last of the bodies, boot pressed against the still twitching form of the Revenant soldier. The thing wasn't dead in the way a normal man would be. Its limbs still spasmed, even with its skull shattered and half its torso torn open by Garmr's jaws. The black eyes, now dull, flickered with something close to power failure, a machine barely pretending to be human. Logan wiped the blood from his face and exhaled. He wasn't sure if they'd won this fight or just bought themselves time. Either way, it didn't matter. The next one was coming. Garmr stood near the edge of the wreckage, staring into the dark, silent as a ghost. He hadn't moved since the last of the enemy had fallen, his breath slow, his posture still. Logan didn't trust him, not fully, but for now, the beast had chosen to stand with them. Cruz staggered out from behind cover, pressing a makeshift bandage to the gash on his temple. "We need to get moving." Havoc reloaded his shotgun. Where the hell to? That was the question, wasn't it? They could keep running, keep fighting, but it wouldn't matter. Project Revenant wouldn't stop. They weren't just hunting the Reapers anymore. They were cleaning up. The entire Blackridge disaster was being erased. Logan knew what that meant. The last thing standing between Revenant and total secrecy was them and Garmr, which meant they weren't just loose ends. They were targets of extinction. He walked toward Cruz, nodding at the tablet in his hand. "We still have the drive?" Cruz lifted the scorched piece of tech. "Still intact. Then we use it." Havoc raised an eyebrow. "Use it how?" Logan turned toward the horizon. The stars were starting to fade, the first hints of dawn stretching pale light over the desert. "We take the fight to them." Silence. Then Cruz gave a low, bitter chuckle. "That's suicide." "Yeah," Logan muttered, "but it's the only chance we've got." They couldn't just keep dodging death forever. If they wanted to survive this, if they wanted to burn this nightmare down to its foundation, they had to go after the people who built it. Cruz sighed, rubbing his temple. "I take it you already have a plan." Logan nodded. "We shut down their command network, the servers, the control nodes. If we take that out, their entire system falls apart." Havoc scoffed. "And what exactly do we use to blow up a top-secret government black site? You got a nuke in your pocket I don't know about?" Logan didn't smile. "We won't need one." Cruz caught on first. "Because they still think we're running." "Exactly." Logan pulled out a map, unfolding the worn paper over the hood of the wrecked truck. "They're not expecting us to hit first. They think we're going to keep running, so they're going to try to box us in. That means resources, assets, a lot of moving parts. And," Logan tapped the map, "and it means they'll be stretched thin. If we strike hard, fast, and at the right place, we can cripple them before they realize what's happening." Havoc crossed his arms. "Where?" Cruz was already scanning through the files. "The closest control hub is 300 miles east. Small, isolated, but heavily fortified. We hit it hard enough, and they'll lose command access to all local Revenant units." Havoc exhaled through his teeth. "You're serious about this?" Logan locked eyes with him. "You got a better idea?" Havoc glanced at the bodies, then at Garmr, still unmoving in the dark. He sighed. "Fine, but if this gets us killed, I'm haunting your ass." Logan smirked. "Noted." Cruz kept scrolling through the data. "We're going to need transport and explosives." Logan looked at the abandoned Revenant vehicles. "Then we take what we need." The Reapers moved quickly, gathering supplies from the wreckage. Ammunition, weapons, fuel. They stripped the bodies for tactical gear, rigging together a plan as fast as they could. Time was their biggest enemy. By the time they were ready, the sun was starting to rise. Logan turned to Garmr. The beast had been watching them the whole time, his expression unreadable. Logan took a slow step forward. "You with us?" Garmr didn't respond, but he didn't walk away either. That was answer enough. Logan exhaled and turned back to his men. "Let's move." The convoy pulled out of the ruins, engines roaring. This wasn't about running anymore. It was about finishing it. The Revenant site was buried in the desert, miles away from anything that resembled civilization. It wasn't on any map, not connected to any federal records, but it was there, and that was all that mattered. Cruz parked the lead vehicle a mile out, peering through binoculars. Small team, maybe 12 guards on the exterior, probably another 10 inside. "Automated defenses?" Logan asked. "Turrets, probably some drone coverage too." Havoc tapped a grenade against his palm. "Sounds like a nightmare." Logan looked at him. "We've had worse." Cruz adjusted his earpiece. "So how do you want to play this?" Logan checked his rifle. "Fast and violent. They moved silently through the dunes, approaching from the east, where the security grid was weakest. The first guard didn't even have time to scream before Logan's knife cut across his throat. The next three fell in quick succession, silenced, before alarms could be raised. Then the real fight started. The first explosion ripped through the perimeter fence, sending fire into the sky. The Reapers surged forward, guns blazing, moving like shadows in the chaos. Crews dropped 2 men with clean headshots. Havoc tore through the defenses, shotgun shredding armor and flesh alike. Logan moved with brutal efficiency, taking down targets before they even knew they were dead. Inside, the alarms were already blaring, but it was too late. They reached the server room within 5 minutes. Cruz was on the console instantly, working fast. "We're in. I'm pulling everything." Havoc stood at the door, breathing hard. "You think this is enough?" Logan knew it wasn't, but it was a start. Then something changed. The temperature in the room dropped. Garmr growled, and Logan felt it before he heard it. Footsteps, not human, not normal, something worse. The door burst inward, and Logan finally saw what came after the Revenants. Something bigger, something worse, the final phase, the real nightmare. It stepped into the room, 7 feet tall, metal and flesh twisted together in ways that shouldn't exist. And it spoke, not in words, in commands. Garmr snarled, and for the first time Logan saw fear in his eyes. Then the thing lunged, and the war truly began. The creature moved like nothing Logan had ever seen. It wasn't just fast. It wasn't just strong. It was something beyond human understanding, a nightmare designed to kill. The thing lunged through the server room doorway, its 7-foot frame moving with a brutal efficiency that sent every instinct in Logan's body screaming. Garmr's growl turned into a full-bodied snarl, his hackles rising. But even the beast hesitated for a fraction of a second, and that was all the thing needed. It was on them in an instant. Cruz barely had time to pull his gun up before the thing ripped it out of his hands and threw him across the room like a rag doll. He crashed into the server racks, the impact shattering metal and glass, sending sparks flying in every direction. Havoc fired. Point blank, shotgun rounds hit center mass, shredding into the thing's chest, and it didn't flinch. Instead, its head tilted, like it was analyzing the damage, calculating. Then it grabbed Havoc by the throat and lifted him off the ground. Logan moved before he could think, grabbing his knife and driving it into the thing's arm. The blade pierced through metal and synthetic muscle, cutting deep, but not deep enough. The thing turned its head toward Logan, and for the first time, he saw its eyes weren't black like the other Revenants. They were silver, cold, reflective, empty. It wasn't just a soldier, it was something new. A voice echoed in the room, not spoken, projected. "You were never meant to leave." Logan pulled his knife free and drove it again, this time straight into the thing's throat. It jerked back, releasing Havoc. The Reaper hit the floor, coughing, scrambling for his weapon. Logan didn't stop. He kept pushing, forcing the thing backward, using its momentary hesitation against it. Cruz was already up, blood trickling down his forehead. "We need to move!" "No shit!" Havoc gasped, still clutching his throat. The server screens flickered, text scrolling too fast to read. Cruz reached for the hard drive still plugged into the console. "I've got it. We need to blow this place now." Logan didn't need to be told twice. He yanked his knife from the creature's throat and drove his boot into its chest, sending it stumbling backward. The moment it hit the wall, Logan grabbed the first grenade he could reach, yanked the pin, and tossed it. The explosion tore through the room. Flames roared to life, licking up the walls, spreading across the racks of classified data. Alarms blared. Logan didn't wait to watch the thing recover, because it would. Instead, he turned and ran. The Reapers tore through the burning corridors, dodging falling debris as fire consumed the facility. Cruz clutched the drive against his chest, covering their flank as they sprinted through the exit. Then Logan saw Garmr. The beast was waiting, but he wasn't watching them. He was staring back into the flames. Logan followed his gaze and saw the thing still standing. It was on fire, its synthetic skin melting, but it didn't scream. It didn't even react. Instead, it stepped forward, unfazed. Logan's stomach turned to ice. They had to go. Now! They broke into the open air, stumbling into the desert night, just as the entire compound detonated behind them. The blast hit like a freight train, throwing them to the ground as heat scorched the sky. For a long moment, everything was fire and noise. Then, silence. Logan pushed himself up, coughing, scanning the wreckage. The facility was gone, flattened. The thing inside, whatever it was, buried beneath tons of burning debris. Havoc lay beside him, groaning. I never want to do that again. Cruz was already getting to his feet, brushing ash off his jacket. He clutched the drive like a lifeline. We have what we need, but this isn't over. Logan knew he was right. They had crippled Project Revenant, but they hadn't killed it, because whatever had been in that facility, it wasn't just one prototype. It was a beginning. Garmr stood over the wreckage, staring at the fire, ears flicking as if listening for something. Then, slowly, he turned, and Logan saw recognition in the beast's eyes, like he knew what came next, like he was ready for it. Logan exhaled. They weren't running anymore. They weren't fighting just to survive. Now, they were hunting. And when they found whoever was still pulling the strings, they were burning it all down. For good. The fire raged behind them, sending thick black smoke into the desert sky. Logan didn't watch the facility burn. He didn't need to. It wasn't over just because they had left it in ruins. Cruz was already scanning through the stolen drive, his fingers moving fast over the blood-smeared tablet screen. He sat on the hood of a stolen SUV, eyes locked on the data, scrolling past too fast to process. We got what we needed, he muttered. Locations, contacts, secondary facilities, it's all here. Logan exhaled slowly. The heat of the explosion still burned against his skin, the dust of the wreckage clinging to his clothes. His body ached. His ribs were bruised, but none of that mattered, not now. Garmr stood on the edge of the firelight, his black fur blending into the night. He hadn't moved since they'd escaped, just watching the flames consume what was left of Project Revenant's command center. Watching like he was waiting for something. Logan turned back to Cruz. How many? Cruz hesitated. Then he met Logan's eyes. More than we thought. Havoc cursed under his breath. Of course there are. Cruz swiped the screen, opening one of the encrypted folders. The documents inside were redacted but still readable. A list of names, locations, and ongoing projects under Revenant's control. Logan leaned in, scanning the names. 4 more sites, 4 more experiments, and the worst part, the one they had just destroyed, was the smallest. Logan straightened, running a hand through his sweat-slicked hair. He already knew what this meant. They had just cut off a limb. Now they had to kill the body. Cruz's voice was grim. They'll move fast. By now they know what we did. They know we're coming. Good, Logan said. Havoc shot him a look. You're enjoying this way too much. Logan didn't answer, because for the first time, he could see the end. Not just survival, an actual end. They could finish this, but before that, they had a choice to make. Cruz tapped the screen. 2 options. We either take out the next facility before they reinforce it, or we go after the people running this. Logan didn't hesitate. We hit their people. Havoc scoffed. What, like assassins now? Logan's eyes were cold. Like soldiers. Silence. Then Cruz nodded. I know where to start. He flipped the tablet, revealing a name. Dr. Elias Sloan, the man who built Project Revenant. Logan stared at the name. Where? Cruz swiped to another file. Private airfield, he's moving, probably already cleaning house after what we just did. Havoc checked his ammo. So we catch him before he's gone. Logan exhaled. Exactly. The Reapers didn't wait. They loaded into the SUVs, engines roaring to life, tires kicking up sand. This wasn't about running anymore. This was a hunt, and by the end of it, Dr. Sloan was going to tell them everything. The airfield sat in the middle of nowhere. Just another abandoned runway lost in the desert, a perfect place to disappear if you were a man like Elias Sloan. Logan parked a half-mile out, scanning the fences. The place wasn't heavily guarded. That was the first mistake. Cruz adjusted the rifle scope, keeping his voice low. "We've got movement near the hangar. Looks like 2 guards outside, maybe more inside." Havoc grinned. "That all?" Logan tightened his grip on the wheel. "We go quiet. No alarms. We need Sloan alive." They moved fast, cutting through the dunes, keeping to the shadows. Garmr followed without a sound, his red eyes locked on the hangar. Logan reached the first guard, moving like a ghost, one hand over the mouth, the other twisting the knife between the ribs. The body slumped without a sound. Cruz took the second guard with a silent shot, the man dropping before he even knew what hit him. The airfield remained silent. Then they were inside. The hangar was massive, its steel walls stretching high, the private jet sitting ready on the runway beyond. Sloan stood near the aircraft, a slim, grey-haired man in a suit, barking orders into a satellite phone. Logan moved first. By the time Sloan noticed him, it was too late. Logan grabbed him by the collar and slammed him against the fuselage. The phone hit the ground, breaking apart on impact. Sloan coughed, eyes wild. "Wait!" Logan pressed the barrel of his pistol to Sloan's temple. "Talk." Sloan tried to keep his voice calm, but Logan could hear the fear underneath. "You don't understand." Logan cut him off by slamming his head into the jet. Sloan gasped, blood running from his forehead. "I understand plenty," Logan growled. "I understand you built this, that you made those things that just tried to rip us apart. I understand that Blackridge wasn't the start. It was just another phase." Sloan shuddered. "They're bigger than you. You can't stop this." Logan pressed harder. "Try me." Sloan's breathing was ragged. He knew there was no getting out of this. So he made a choice. He talked, not because he wanted to, but because he knew something worse was coming. His voice was weak. Revenant was never just about soldiers, not just about war. Cruz stepped forward, gripping the tablet. "We know about the other facilities. What are they making there?" Sloan swallowed hard. "You still don't get it. Blackridge was a test, a field experiment, but the real project?" Logan's stomach tightened. Sloan's eyes flickered to the shadows of the hangar. "The real project isn't machines," Cruz frowned. "Then what the hell is it?" Sloan's face twisted. "It's us." Logan barely had time to process that before the gunfire started. The first round hit the metal beside his head. The second hit Havoc's shoulder, sending him stumbling back, cursing. Logan turned, gun up, and saw them, not guards, not soldiers. People. Or at least they used to be. Their eyes were silver, like the thing in the server room. They moved in perfect synchronization. Sloan laughed. Even bleeding, even cornered, he laughed. "You didn't think you were the only ones, did you?" Logan fired, dropping the first attacker. The body twitched but didn't stop. Not until Garmr ripped its throat out. Sloan coughed, spitting blood. "You're too late, it's already started." The gunfire ripped through the hangar, the Reapers fighting, moving, barely holding the line. Logan didn't hesitate. He grabbed Sloan and dragged him toward the jet. "If it started," he growled, "then tell me where it ends." Sloan's bloody smile widened. "You already know." Logan didn't have time for riddles. He slammed the gun against Sloan's skull. "Where?" Sloan gasped, barely holding on to consciousness. Then he whispered one word, and Logan felt his stomach drop. Because it wasn't a place. It was a name Logan knew, because he had already escaped it once. Sloan grinned through bloody teeth. "You're going back to Blackridge." The war wasn't over. It had never even left the starting line. And now Logan and his crew were heading straight into the fire. The jet's engines screamed against the night sky, but Logan barely heard them over the sound of gunfire still echoing inside the hangar. The air was thick with smoke and blood, the Reapers pushing back against enemies they still didn't fully understand. They moved like men, but they weren't. They didn't hesitate, didn't slow, didn't stop even after being shot. Logan had seen this before back at Blackridge, but those had been prototypes. These weren't. These were the final product. Project Revenant had never been about controlling dogs. It had never been about cybernetic soldiers. It had been about pushing the limits of human control, turning men into weapons that could obey without question, without fear, without the burden of thought. And now those weapons had been turned on them. Havoc had taken 2 rounds but was still standing, pressing a hand to his bleeding side as he fired his shotgun into the advancing figures. Cruz had flipped one of the armored crates for cover, eyes locked on the stolen drive, as he desperately tried to extract more intel before they lost their only chance at knowing what came next. Garmr had already killed 3 of them, his massive form tearing through flesh and synthetic bone alike, but even he had hesitated. Logan had seen it in the way the beast had paused, had growled, but not lunged right away, as if he recognized something in them, as if he knew what they were before any of them did. Sloan lay slumped against the fuselage, blood dribbling down his chin, his smile just barely visible in the dim emergency lighting. "You can't win," he wheezed, voice thick with pain but laced with something else. Amusement. "You think taking me out changes anything?" Logan didn't hesitate. He put a bullet through Sloan's knee. The doctor screamed, the sound barely audible over the chaos. But the pain was real. Whatever they had turned the Revenant soldiers into, Sloan hadn't gotten the same treatment. He was just a man who had created nightmares. "Tell me who's running it now," Logan growled, stepping forward, pressing his boot into the ruined joint. Sloan's breath came in ragged gasps, but the amusement never left his eyes. "You already know," he spat. "You think Blackridge was the end? That was just the first phase. The real project was never about prisons, never about controlling soldiers. It was about ownership of everything." Logan's fingers twitched against the grip of his gun. He wanted to pull the trigger, wanted to end this bastard right here. But he needed more. "Where are they running it from?" Sloan coughed, blood splattering against the cold metal of the plane's hull. "It doesn't matter. They're already moving to the final stage." "You're too late," Logan pressed harder, watching Sloan grit his teeth against the pain. "Then tell me what the final stage is." The scientist actually laughed, even through the agony. "It's happening right now. It's already happening." Logan yanked him up by the collar, dragging him forward. "Explain." Sloan grinned, his eyes dark despite the blood running into them. "You think they needed an army? No, they needed proof of concept. What happens when you push the human body past its limit, past morality, past free will? Revenant isn't an experiment anymore. It's a product. It's going to market." Logan's stomach twisted. Not soldiers, not war machines. This wasn't about controlling a battlefield. This was about controlling people. The sound of approaching helicopters cut through the hangar, the rhythmic chopping of rotors growing closer. Cruz snapped his head up from the tablet. "We gotta go, now!" Logan didn't waste another second. He slammed Sloan's head against the plane, knocking him out cold, then turned to the others. "Get on the damn jet!" The Reapers moved fast, dragging the last of their gear onto the aircraft as Logan climbed into the cockpit. He didn't know if the plane was even ready to fly, but it didn't matter. They had no other option. The first spotlight hit the tarmac just as Logan ignited the engines, the jet lurching forward, gaining speed as bullets pinged off the fuselage. He gritted his teeth, pushing the throttle as far as it would go. The ground forces were already moving to block them, but they weren't fast enough. The plane lifted, wheels barely clearing the runway, before an explosion ripped through the hangar behind them, sending a shockwave of heat and debris into the night. They were in the air. They were still alive. But for how long? Logan pulled the jet into a steady climb, his pulse hammering against his ribs. Cruz leaned over the console, breathless. "Where the hell are we going?" Logan didn't answer right away. His mind was running too fast, connecting pieces, trying to make sense of what Sloan had said. They weren't stopping soldiers. They weren't stopping a war. They were stopping a system, and the only way to do that, they had to go back to the beginning. They had to finish Blackridge. Cruz must have seen the look in Logan's eyes because he swore under his breath. "You're insane." Havoc, still clutching his side, let out a dry chuckle. "No argument here?" Garmr sat in the corner of the cabin, his breathing slow, his red eyes watching Logan in silence. There was no fear in them, no hesitation. He was waiting for what came next. Logan exhaled, gripping the controls. "No more running," he said. Cruz let out a slow breath, nodding. "Then let's burn them down." The jet banked east, cutting through the clouds. They had a long way to go, and no time left to waste, because if what Sloan said was true, if Project Revenant had already moved to the next phase, then the whole world was running out of time. The Reapers weren't just fighting for themselves anymore. They were fighting for everyone. And Logan Mercer was going to make damn sure they finished what they started, no matter what it took. The jet cut through the sky, black against the endless horizon, a ghost moving through the clouds. Logan kept his grip steady on the controls, but his mind wasn't in the cockpit. It was running ahead, faster than the engines, faster than the Reapers could afford. The plan wasn't solid. It wasn't even a plan yet, but it was all they had. Blackridge had been the beginning. Now it had to be the end. Cruz was strapped into the seat beside him, scanning the stolen drive for anything they could use. Havoc was behind them, still pressing a rag to the wound in his side. His head tipped back against the seat, muttering curses under his breath. Reno had his rifle across his lap, fingers twitching as if he were itching for a fight, even though there wasn't one. Not yet. And Garmr. The beast sat in the back, silent, unmoving, his breath slow and measured. His red eyes weren't locked on the window, weren't following the shift in altitude. They were on Logan, watching, waiting. Logan wasn't sure if that meant Garmr trusted him or if the beast was simply making calculations, the same way he had in the desert, the same way he had in the facility before turning on the other revenants. There was no guarantee this was loyalty. It could have just been strategy, but Logan wasn't going to second-guess it now. The radio crackled. Cruz stiffened beside him, reaching for the dial. "They're hailing us." Logan exhaled, flexing his fingers against the controls. "Who?" Cruz adjusted the frequency, but the voice came through before he could respond. "You think you can run from this?" A chill ran down Logan's spine. It wasn't Kane. It wasn't Sloan. It was someone new, or maybe someone who had been there all along. He didn't respond, didn't need to. The voice on the other end didn't hesitate. "You're making this harder on yourselves. You could have let it burn. You could have walked away." Logan ground his teeth. "I don't walk away." A low chuckle, cold, unbothered. "No," the voice murmured, "you don't." Cruz was already scanning the signals. "This is coming from a secure channel. They found us." Logan clenched his jaw. Of course they had. "They're tracking us?" Reno asked, pushing forward between the seats. "No," Cruz said. "They're letting us know they could." A power play, a message. They weren't chasing the Reapers. They were waiting. Logan flicked the switch, killing the radio. He didn't need to hear more. He turned back to Cruz. "Find me a landing point, close to Blackridge, but not too close." Cruz was already pulling up coordinates. "There's an abandoned airstrip 40 miles out. Looks like it used to be a smuggler hub." Logan nodded. "That'll do." Havoc let out a slow breath. "We really doing this?" Logan glanced back at Garmr. The beast still hadn't moved. Logan nodded. "Yeah, we're doing this." The jet continued cutting through the sky. But something in the air had shifted. This wasn't an escape anymore. This was a return, a war waiting to be fought. And when they landed, when the Reapers touched down near Blackridge, there would be no turning back. No more running, no more waiting. This was the final stand, and Logan intended to end it, no matter the cost. The jet touched down on the abandoned airstrip with a rough jolt, dust kicking up around the landing gear as Logan pulled back the throttle. The engines whined, metal groaning in protest, but it held. They had made it. For now. Logan barely exhaled before Cruz unstrapped himself, moving fast to secure the drive. Reno was already checking weapons, his face locked in something close to anger, or maybe anticipation. Havoc pulled himself out of his seat with a grunt, wincing as he adjusted the blood-soaked rag pressed to his ribs. "We need a plan," Cruz said, voice clipped. Logan already had one. It wasn't clean, it wasn't safe, but that had never mattered before. They weren't here to survive anymore. They were here to finish it. They had to take Blackridge, not just go back, not just shut down Revenant's last operation. They had to own it. Havoc swore under his breath, rolling his shoulder. I'm guessing knocking on the front gate ain't an option. Logan glanced at Garmr. The beast had already stepped off the plane, pacing the edge of the airstrip, his head low, ears flicking toward the desert beyond. He could feel it too. They weren't alone. Logan stepped down into the dust, gripping his rifle tighter. No, he muttered. We don't go in through the front. Cruz adjusted his gear, tapping at his tablet. The original tunnels under Blackridge still exist. Some of them collapsed when they converted the prison. But there's at least one route that still works. We can move in underneath them. Reno cracked his knuckles. So we sneak in, hit hard, take out whatever they've got left? Logan nodded. That's the idea, Havoc scoffed. And what if the idea gets us killed? Logan met his eyes steady. Then we go down burning everything behind us. No one argued, because this was it. They weren't just fighting for themselves anymore. They were fighting to make sure this didn't happen again. They had seen what Revenant had built. They had fought its creations. And if this system survived, if this control was allowed to keep spreading, there wouldn't be anything left worth saving. Logan took a slow breath. We move in 1 hour. Cruz and Reno split off, a checking gear. Havoc rolled his shoulder, muttering something about needing a damn cigarette. Garmr hadn't moved. Logan watched him from the corner of his eye. The beast had chosen them back at the compound, but Logan knew better than to mistake that for loyalty. Garmr wasn't here out of allegiance. He was here because this fight was his, too. Because whatever Revenant had built, whatever came next, Garmr knew it was something that shouldn't exist. Logan didn't look away. You're staying with us, right? Garmr's red eyes flicked toward him, unblinking. Then slow, deliberate, the beast stepped forward. Logan exhaled. Good enough. He turned back to the Reapers. It was time. They left the airstrip under the cover of darkness, moving across the desert in a tight, silent formation. Logan could feel the shift in the air, the weight of something unseen pressing down on them the closer they got to Blackridge. It wasn't fear. It was anticipation. The old tunnels were exactly where Cruz said they would be, half buried in rock, covered in decades of neglect. The entrance was tight, barely wide enough for them to squeeze through, but once inside, the space opened up. Old concrete walls, rusted pipes, stale air. The last remnants of the original Blackridge, the one that had existed before Revenant took over. They moved carefully, their boots silent against the cracked floor. Garmr stayed ahead of them, his massive body pressed low, moving through the dark like a shadow given shape. Logan kept his rifle ready, his breath steady. They were getting close. Then the sound changed, a vibration, a hum, electricity. Reno pressed himself against the wall, signaling for silence. Cruz checked the tablet, his face unreadable. We're underneath the main facility now, Logan exhaled, nodding. We set the charges, we move fast. Cruz hesitated. Logan caught it immediately. What? Cruz's jaw tensed. There's a problem. He turned the tablet, showing the screen. It wasn't just a command center. It wasn't just a fortress. It was a lab. And the test subjects weren't dogs. They were people. Logan's chest tightened. What the hell are they doing? Havoc whispered. Cruz scrolled through the files. It's not soldiers. Not exactly. They're running full cognitive sync experiments, trying to make the Revenants permanent. Logan's throat went dry. Permanent. No more control signals, no more commands, just pure obedience. Human minds wiped clean, overwritten by whatever Revenant had perfected. Cruz's voice was grim. They're finishing the last phase. They don't need drones anymore. They want to make the real thing. Logan stared at the screen. Then he looked up at his crew, and he knew. They couldn't just destroy Blackridge. They had to save who they could. He turned to Garmr. The beast was still tense, still watching, but he wasn't growling. He wasn't waiting to kill. He was waiting for Logan to decide. Logan clenched his jaw. Then he made the choice. We're not just blowing this place up, he said, voice steady. We're getting those people out. Silence. Then Havoc sighed. God damn it, Logan. But he didn't argue. Because this wasn't just about revenge anymore. This was about redemption. For them. For Garmr. For whatever the hell was left of the people inside that lab. Logan adjusted his rifle. They were going in. And they weren't leaving until every last one of them was free. No more running. No more waiting. Blackridge falls tonight, and Revenant dies with it. The tunnels stretched on like a labyrinth of concrete and rust, a forgotten artery leading straight into the blackened heart of Blackridge. Every step forward carried the weight of finality. This was it. There would be no second chances, no escape routes. Either they tore Project Revenant down, or they died here trying. Logan moved ahead of the others, his rifle steady, every footstep calculated. Cruz was behind him, scanning the stolen tablet for blueprints of the underground structure. Havoc and Reno took the rear, their weapons up, eyes sharp. And then there was Garmr. The beast slunk ahead of them, silent as a shadow, ears twitching at sounds none of them could hear. No alarms, no footsteps, but Logan knew better. Something was waiting. Cruz whispered from behind him, I found it. The lower access point leads straight into the facility's control hub. Security is thin down here, but once we breach, they'll know we're inside. Logan didn't slow. Then we make the first move. The plan was simple. Hit hard, move fast, burn everything. But that plan had changed the moment Cruz found the files. The moment they realized this wasn't just another Blackridge experiment, it wasn't about soldiers. It wasn't about enhanced K9s. It was about people. People who had been wiped clean, reformatted, turned into something beyond human, something owned. Logan clenched his jaw. No matter how deep this ran, no matter how many people had signed off on this horror, it ended tonight. They reached the access hatch. A rusted steel door covered in decades of grime. Logan signaled for Havoc, who stepped forward and set the charge. Reno counted down. 3, 2, 1. The blast was contained, the door bursting inward with a dull whoomp that sent dust cascading down like a dying breath. Logan moved first, rifle raised, stepping into the darkness. The corridor beyond was too clean. Sterile white walls flickering over headlights. The air smelled of disinfectant and cold metal. And then came the sound. Not alarms, not shouting. A voice, projected from the speakers lining the hallway, smooth and cold. You shouldn't have come back. Logan didn't stop. Neither should you. The first guard appeared at the end of the hall, stepping forward with military precision, his body clad in Revenant armor. Logan fired before the man could react, the round slamming into his chest, sending him crashing back against the wall. Then the alarm screamed to life. Red warning lights bathed the hallway in a sickly glow, and from the doors lining the corridor, they started to emerge. Not guards, not soldiers. The test subjects. Logan's breath caught in his chest. They weren't moving like humans. Their steps were perfectly synchronized, their heads tilting in eerie unison. Their eyes were silver. They had no hesitation, no fear, no will. Havoc swore under his breath, Jesus Christ! Then they attacked. The hallway erupted into chaos. The test subjects moved with terrifying precision, dodging bullets, adapting mid-motion. Reno went down under the weight of 2 of them, one grabbing his rifle while the other slammed a fist into his face, hard enough to crack bone. Logan fired, hitting one in the skull. The body staggered, but it didn't fall. It kept coming. Garmr tore through the crowd, his jaws clamping onto a throat, crushing bone. One of the subjects tried to twist free, but Garmr slammed it to the ground, his claws raking across its chest. For the first time, Logan saw fear in their faces. Not from pain, not from death, from Garmr. They knew what he was, and they knew he wasn't on their side. Logan grabbed Cruz and pulled him back. We need to move! Cruz wiped blood from his mouth. They're not stopping! Logan knew that. They weren't fighting men. They were fighting empty bodies controlled by something larger than them, something woven into their very nerves. But even a system had its limits. He pushed forward, barreling through the melee, leading the charge toward the control hub. Havoc and Reno covered their flank, laying down suppressing fire as more subjects poured from the side corridors. They reached the reinforced doors. Crews slammed the access panel, bypassing the security locks with the stolen tablet. The doors hissed open, and inside they found the core. It wasn't a server room. It was a chamber. Rows of bodies stood suspended in glass tanks, wires and IV drips feeding into their arms, their heads locked into place by steel harnesses. Their eyes were open, all silver. Crews scanned the terminal. This is it. This is how they control them. Full sensory override, no signals, no radio commands, direct stimulation of the nervous system. Logan moved to the main console. Can you shut it down? Crews hesitated. Maybe. Not good enough. Crews cursed under his breath. This isn't just a control system, it's a network. If I cut the feed, I don't know what happens to the people hooked into it. Logan stared at the bodies, at the people. He had spent years running, fighting, killing, but he wasn't here to kill, he was here to end this. He gritted his teeth. Do it! Crews hesitated, then nodded. Fingers flying over the keyboard, code flashing across the screen. The system fought back, alarms shrieking as security protocols kicked in. Then the lights flickered, the first glass chamber shattered, the body inside convulsed, gasping, eyes wide as he screamed, then the second, the third. All around them people collapsed from the harnesses, coughing, retching, their minds waking up from whatever hell they had been trapped in. But then the final alarm rang out, and Logan knew. Revenant had just cut their losses. Crews barely had time to turn before the countdown appeared on the screen. Oh, hell no! Self-destruct sequence. The entire facility was about to go up. Logan didn't hesitate. Move! The Reapers grabbed who they could, dragging the freed prisoners toward the exit. The ground shook beneath them as explosions rocked the structure. Garmr led the way, his massive form knocking aside debris, guiding them through the crumbling corridors. The tunnel collapsed behind them just as they reached the open air, and Blackridge was gone. Smoke curled into the sky. The mountains swallowed the remains of the facility, burying every secret, every horror, every last trace of Project Revenant's experiments. It was over. The war was over. Logan stood in the dust, his breath sharp in his chest. The survivors, the people Revenant had turned into test subjects, knelt in the dirt, shaking, some sobbing, some staring at nothing. Some Havoc wiped the blood from his face. Jesus Christ, we actually did it. Crews exhaled, shaking his head. We bought time. Logan turned to look at Garmr. The beast stood on the ridge, watching the sun rise over the wreckage, his red eyes reflecting the light. No more Blackridge, no more commands. He was free. They all were. Logan breathed deep, feeling the weight lift off his chest for the first time in years. Maybe it wasn't perfect. Maybe the war wasn't truly over. But for now, they had won, and that was enough. For now. The wreckage of Blackridge still smoldered in the distance, the last of its secrets buried beneath rubble and fire. Logan stood on the outskirts of the ruined facility, watching as the dust settled. The mountain had swallowed the past, but something told him that what they had destroyed was only a fraction of what Project Revenant had built. The freed survivors were gathered near the makeshift camp. Dazed, weak, but alive. Crews moved between them, checking pulses, ensuring they weren't going into shock. Most of them barely understood what had happened to them. They had been prisoners inside their own minds, turned into something else, forced to move, to fight, to obey. And now, for the first time in God knows how long, they were free. But Logan knew that freedom came with a price. Some of them wouldn't remember who they were, others wouldn't want to. Havoc dropped onto a crate beside Logan, wincing as he pressed a fresh bandage to his side. So, he muttered, exhaling. What now? That was the question, wasn't it? What now? They had fought their way through hell, burned Revenant to the ground, but something in Logan's gut told him this wasn't the end. The people who had built this weren't dead. The system that allowed it to exist wasn't gone. It was just licking its wounds, waiting to strike back, but he couldn't focus on that. Not yet. Right now, they had won. Reno walked up, tossing a canteen into Logan's hands. "Locals are coming." Logan arched a brow. "Locals? Not civilians," Reno clarified. "Not exactly. Ex-military, contractors, people who got tired of taking orders from the wrong men." Logan drank deep from the canteen, wiping his mouth. "And why are they coming here?" Cruz approached, shoving the tablet into Logan's hands. "Because of this." Logan scanned the screen, brow furrowing. The drive they had stolen from Revenant's servers had been broadcasting since they accessed it, leaking data onto the dark web, spreading to contacts Logan didn't even know Cruz had. Someone out there had picked up the trail, and now they were coming. A low growl rumbled behind them. Logan turned. Garmr was watching from the ridge, his red eyes gleaming in the firelight. The beast had barely rested since the fight, his breathing slow, his body tense. He had chosen them, but he hadn't chosen peace. Logan understood that. Garmr wasn't wired for it. Neither was he. The first vehicles appeared on the horizon, kicking up dust as they approached the camp. Not military, but not civilians either. Logan could tell by the way they moved, the precision of the convoy. The first truck rolled to a stop, the driver stepping out. A woman, mid-40s, combat gear well worn but clean. Her eyes scanned the camp, locking onto Logan with the kind of weight only someone with history carried. "You're Mercer?" Logan nodded. She gestured to the wreckage behind them. "You're the reason Blackridge is gone." Logan shrugged. "You could say that." A slow smile spread across her face. "Good." She turned to the others climbing out of the trucks. More like her, all hardened, all survivors of wars, both official and unofficial. "Set up the perimeter, get supplies to the ones who need it. We're staying the night." Cruz exchanged a glance with Logan. "Who the hell are you?" She extended a hand. "Walker. I used to be one of them." That caught Logan's attention. Walker leaned against the truck, watching the freed prisoners with something close to regret in her eyes. "I was contracted for Blackridge before Revenant took over. I saw what they were doing. I left before they could make me a part of it, but not everyone had that chance." Logan folded his arms. "And now you're here because—" Walker exhaled. "Because I've been waiting for someone to do what you just did." She motioned to the data Cruz was holding. "That leak? It didn't just hit mercs like me. It hit everyone. Your little war didn't stay quiet. People are listening." Logan felt the weight of her words settle in his chest. This wasn't just about revenge anymore. This wasn't just about wiping Blackridge off the map. It was about exposing everything. The system, the men behind it, the people who had let it happen. Walker studied him for a moment, then nodded. "We want in." Havoc scoffed. "In on what? We don't have an army," Walker smiled. "You do now." The camp was quiet for the first time since the fight. Logan looked around at the survivors, the Reapers, the mercs stepping into the firelight. He had spent his whole life on the other side of wars like this, fighting for scraps, for survival. But now, people were following him. Because for the first time, he had burned something bigger than just an enemy. He had burned a lie, and people were paying attention. Walker clapped him on the shoulder, a firm grip, one that meant something. "You lit the match, Mercer. Now let's see how big this fire gets." Logan exhaled. He looked at Cruz, at Reno, at Havoc, at Garmr. They were still standing, still breathing, still moving forward, so he nodded. "Let's burn them all." The fire behind them crackled, the night stretching long, the world shifting under their feet. The war wasn't over, not by a long shot, but now they weren't fighting it alone. And the people who had built this nightmare, they were about to learn what it felt like to be hunted. Because the Black Reapers weren't just outlaws anymore. They were something much worse. They were the Reckoning. And they were just getting started. The first morning light crept over the ruined horizon, cutting through the haze of dust and smoke, still lingering in the air. The echoes of war hadn't faded yet, but something was different now. Something had shifted. Logan stood at the edge of the camp, staring out into the desert, feeling the weight of the past pressing against him, like an old wound that had never healed right. Blackridge was gone. The system that created it wasn't. Behind him, the camp was stirring. The survivors, some still disoriented, some finally realizing what had been done to them, moved carefully, speaking in hushed tones. Walker's people were already working, setting up defenses, patching the wounded, reinforcing what they could. This wasn't just a temporary holdout anymore. It was something else. Crews approached, holding the last functional tablet they had salvaged from Revenant servers. His face was unreadable, but Logan could tell the news wasn't good. "They're moving," Crew said. "What's left of Revenant isn't waiting for us to make another move. They're already erasing themselves." Logan clenched his jaw. "How much have we lost?" Cruz hesitated. "Almost everything. The last facility, the last trace of proof. Revenant wasn't just running, they were burning their own tracks." Reno joined them, rubbing a tired hand over his face. "So what do we do now? If they wipe themselves out before we can get to them, then what the hell was this all for?" Logan stared at the rising sun. He had spent his entire life chasing shadows, fighting battles that never truly ended. This was supposed to be different. It was supposed to mean something, and it did. He turned, looking at the camp, at the freed survivors, at Walker's people stepping up beside the Reapers, ready for whatever came next. This wasn't the end. It was the beginning of something bigger. Havoc walked up, exhaling sharply as he lit a cigarette. His arm was still in a makeshift sling, his face bruised but defiant. "So, we hunting them or what?" Logan didn't answer right away, because for the first time he wasn't sure. Not about what they had done, not about what still needed to be done, but about whether he was the one who needed to do it. Revenant had built something monstrous. It wasn't just about soldiers. It wasn't just about control. It was about what came next. And Logan had spent his whole life fighting the past. Maybe it was time to let the next war belong to someone else. Walker stepped forward, crossing her arms. "You started something here, Mercer." Logan nodded. "I know. And you're not the only one who wants to finish it." He met her eyes. She wasn't asking. She wasn't suggesting. She was taking the fight forward. And maybe that was the right thing. The Reapers had burned their way through Blackridge, cut the head off Revenant's current operations. But this war, it didn't belong to outlaws. It belonged to people who could build something better. He turned to Cruz, to Reno, to Havoc. They were watching him, waiting for the next command. But this time, he didn't have one, because maybe their war was finally over. Logan inhaled deeply, then nodded. "Then take it from here." Walker studied him for a long moment, then she nodded. No arguments, no questions. Because she understood, because she had seen men like Logan before, men who knew when they had given everything they had left. He turned back to the camp. Some of the survivors were still staring at him, still waiting to see what he would do next, but he wasn't staying. Garmr moved beside him, his massive form casting a long shadow in the morning light. He hadn't left Logan's side since Blackridge fell. But Logan wondered if maybe the beast understood, in some deep, unspoken way, that this wasn't their fight anymore. They had done what needed to be done. Now it was someone else's turn. Logan exhaled, glancing at Cruz one last time. "You coming?" Cruz smirked, shaking his head. "Nah. Someone's got to make sure these idiots don't blow themselves up." Reno grinned. "Yeah, and someone's got to keep the legend of Grim Mercer alive." Havoc rolled his eyes. "Try not to get sentimental, boys." Logan let out a quiet chuckle, the closest thing to a real laugh he had let himself have in a long time. He nodded once, then he turned, and he walked away. Garmr moved with him, silent as always, his red eyes scanning the horizon. They didn't look back, because they didn't need to. The war was still going, the fight wasn't over, but it wasn't their war anymore. Their part of the story was done. And for the first time in his life, Logan Mercer was okay with that. The desert stretched before them. endless and unknown. And for the first time it wasn't a battlefield, it was just a road, one that didn't need to end in blood. At least, not today. The first morning light crept over the ruined horizon, cutting through the haze of dust and smoke still lingering in the air. The echoes of war hadn't faded yet, but something was different now. Something had shifted. Logan stood at the edge of the camp, staring out into the desert, feeling the weight of the past pressing against him like an old wound that had never healed right. Blackridge was gone. The system that created it wasn't. Behind him, the camp was stirring. The survivors, some still disoriented, some finally realizing what had been done to them, moved carefully, speaking in hushed tones. Walker's people were already working, setting up defenses, patching the wounded, reinforcing what they could. This wasn't just a temporary holdout anymore. It was something else. Cruz approached, holding the last functional tablet they had salvaged from Revenant servers. His face was unreadable, but Logan could tell the news wasn't good. "They're moving," Cruz said. "What's left of Revenant isn't waiting for us to make another move. They're already erasing themselves." Logan clenched his jaw. "How much have we lost?" Cruz hesitated. "Almost everything." The last facility. The last trace of proof. Revenant wasn't just running, they were burning their own tracks. Reno joined them, rubbing a tired hand over his face. "So what do we do now? If they wipe themselves out before we can get to them, then what the hell was this all for?" Logan stared at the rising sun. He had spent his entire life chasing shadows, fighting battles that never truly ended. This was supposed to be different. It was supposed to mean something, and it did. He turned, looking at the camp, at the freed survivors, at Walker's people stepping up beside the Reapers, ready for whatever came next. This wasn't the end. It was the beginning of something bigger. Havoc walked up, exhaling sharply as he lit a cigarette. His arm was still in a makeshift sling, his face bruised but defiant. "So, we hunting them or what?" Logan didn't answer right away, because for the first time, he wasn't sure. Not about what they had done, not about what still needed to be done, but about whether he was the one who needed to do it. Revenant had built something monstrous. It wasn't just about soldiers, it wasn't just about control, it was about what came next. And Logan had spent his whole life fighting the past. Maybe it was time to let the next war belong to someone else. Walker stepped forward, crossing her arms. "You started something here, Mercer." Logan nodded. "I know. And you're not the only one who wants to finish it." He met her eyes. She wasn't asking. She wasn't suggesting. She was taking the fight forward. And maybe that was the right thing. The Reapers had burned their way through Blackridge, cut the head off Revenant's current operations. But this war, it didn't belong to outlaws. It belonged to people who could build something better. He turned to Cruz, to Reno, to Havoc. They were watching him, waiting for the next command. But this time, he didn't have one, because maybe their war was finally over. Logan inhaled deeply, then nodded. "Then take it from here." Walker studied him for a long moment. Then she nodded. No arguments, no questions, because she understood, because she had seen men like Logan before, men who knew when they had given everything they had left. He turned back to the camp. Some of the survivors were still staring at him, still waiting to see what he would do next. But he wasn't staying. Garmr moved beside him, his massive form casting a long shadow in the morning light. He hadn't left Logan's side since Blackridge fell, but Logan wondered if maybe the beast understood, in some deep, unspoken way, that this wasn't their fight anymore. They had done what needed to be done. Now it was someone else's turn. Logan exhaled, glancing at Cruz one last time. "You coming?" Cruz smirked, shaking his head. "Nah, someone's got to make sure these idiots don't blow themselves up." Reno grinned. "Yeah. And someone's got to keep the legend of Grim Mercer alive." Havoc rolled his eyes. "Try not to get sentimental, boys." Logan let out a quiet chuckle, the closest thing to a real laugh he had let himself have in a long time. He nodded once, then he turned, and he walked away. Garmr moved with him, silent as always, his red eyes scanning the horizon. They didn't look back, because they didn't need to. The war was still going. The fight wasn't over. But it wasn't their war anymore. Their part of the story was done. And for the first time in his life, Logan Mercer was okay with that. The desert stretched before them, endless and unknown. And for the first time, it wasn't a battlefield. It was just a road, one that didn't need to end in blood, at least not today.